Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in this week to the Storytelling Alchemist show. I am very excited to have a repeat guest on the show. She is now calling in. I think the last time she was in Maryland that she was on the show, and now she's on the other side of the pond in Hamburg, Germany. And so I think I've asked her where she's at least two or three times in the past few months. And she's like, Hamburg, Jeremy, and don't mispronounce the name. And so what we're going to be talking about this week, I think this is very much needed. And we're going to be talking about communication in business and relationships. And who better to talk about that than Dr. Natalie Forrest? Dr. Natalie Forrest, how are you today?
Oh, I am peachy. I can't wait to see what we want to talk about in regards to communication.
Well, it started to come up for me because obviously I've been thinking about things where I could have been better at communicating. And then I'm looking at, in business where I help coach people, that are not communicating with their teams and, their employers and stuff like that. And not only that, this trickles out in life too. I mean, like, how often do we like miss opportunities? It's not even just about anything other than just expressing yourself in the moment that you need to express yourself. So, yeah.
And I think it's about how we express ourselves, right? I just it's funny that you brought that up because I have a client and she's got some things going on at her workplace. And of course, I said, well, how do you talk with them? What do you do with them? And she does nice things, but then there are those moments where she just explodes. And she believes she's explained everything to them on how she would like things to be done, which she probably has. But the question is, has it from her telling them really arrived with them? And so I talk with her. I said, maybe make sure they understand why you do what you do. It's not just that you expect them to do it right, but why is it important? And I think that to me is a huge issue in communication. The transmission of why does this matter? Why are we actually talking about this? Why is this an important task? Why is this important to my heart? Whatever it is. But that transmission, I think, is very often not acknowledged because we think, I know why. Of course, everybody knows why.
And well, it's so silly too, because like one of the things that I've been looking at, and I was with a friend last week riding in the car, and I put a post out about this on Facebook. Well, basically, I was rambling because I was talking about Dr. Goswami being on the show and how excited I was about having him on the show. And this is probably like the fourth or fifth time I've interviewed him. And, I was talking about how I saw him on What the Bleep back in 2002, 2003. And that was kind of the change of my spirituality, how I felt. That's life-changing. And so, I had fangirled about interviewing him the first time and messed up his name like 4 times in the interview because I was so nervous. So anyways, I was talking just like this. You could tell my excitement, and which is usual because you know me, Dr. Forrest, for a while. I'm pretty calm and stuff like that. Anyways, I'm like, am I rambling? And they said, am I boring? You making you fall asleep? And I know that every time we get in the car, my friend falls asleep. Just the driving of the car makes him fall asleep. So he's like, no, I'm definitely hearing you, and I'm really proud of you. And and everything you've accomplished. And I'm so excited you're having this interview tomorrow. Anyway, so he heard what I was saying. And what I was getting at is like, how often do we miss that was a small, minor, interaction. And so, however, it was obvious if I look back at myself, I was insecure at that moment about talking too much. And isn't that how we create intimacy amongst people we care about, is just to ask the silly questions so that we don't have that stored inside of us, so it doesn't build into something bigger. So eventually we feel like, you don't pay attention to me.
Right. Yeah, it is. Or it's, how often, not necessarily insecurity, but, if you've experienced something really, really cool, or you have a burning question on your mind, you just walk into your friend's office, your spouse's office, or a colleague's office. You're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And you're just shooting it all out. And that person is sitting there, maybe they've been working on something, or maybe they're lost in thought, whatever it is. They're not ready to receive. So they're just like looking at you. And then while you're talking, you're really excited, or you need an answer, you're starting to get aggravated because you have not set the tone. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, blah, blah, or you get upset because they're not responding. And then it's like, it's this wheel. And I think the setup, as you just mentioned, is really important. Like sometimes we just start blurting things out, which is great. But then being able to say, is this actually a good time?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I've done that to you. I called you on the phone and I just started, because I'm the type of person I'll be like, hey, Jeremy, how's it going? I'm blah, 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 because the excitement comes out. And of course, as a professional, I've had to learn to ground myself and, that kind of stuff. But I think it is the setup, but it's also the person, it's okay to say, look at somebody you care about and say, listen, I do want to hear what you have to say. And I have to finish this. And so I've even set up with friends and all my friends that, hey, you have the permission. I won't get my feelings hurt. I know how I am. And, when you say, maybe let's meet, later on. And that's okay too, because we all have busy lives. And, and sometimes, people are moms and dads on top of, husbands and wives and on top of their jobs. And if you're Dr. Forrest, you're the CEO of like 10 companies and a New York Times bestseller, and
not all that, but I think what I have found is two main things. Number one, whatever you say it with love, like you just mentioned. I'd really like to hear what you got to say, but can't right now. And then you're saying it with love, so that transfers out. And however the other person receives is that sort of their issue, right? The second thing is really setting up or talking about expectations. And we all have them somewhere. Very often we forget to really mention what we expect. So let me give you an example, okay? In a relationship, if I cook all the time, okay, then after a while the other person is expecting that I'm going to be cooking. And while I'm cooking, I haven't said it, but I might be expecting them to take out the trash, right? Because I'm cooking, so somebody else. No, it's a partnership. Or at work, you have a job, you've read the job description, so your expectations are to be doing what the job description says. But let's face it, that's usually not what happens at work. There's usually other stuff that comes up as well. So being able to express your expectations and ask what others expect of you in a positive, communicative way is really important. To me, years ago, I learned and became a facilitator in appreciative inquiry. And that is, of course, that approach of saying, all right, we can talk about bad stuff all the time and really get our energies flowing in a not so good way. Or we can sit down and say, okay, what do you want more of and how do we get it?
Right.
And I think that's the key when we're talking about communication. Do we want to get upset at each other, or do we want to grow the love that we have for each other? And for that, we need to communicate. And I saw a post, I think it was today or yesterday from you, which you say, there are some insecurities and I usually don't open up. Well, you need to open up and trust others to have that openness at home, at school, and at work. You need to be able to talk to people.
And it's so powerful that, because I always thought I was just this great communicator and, public speaker. I get on radio shows, I teach about communication. And then what you do is it's like you unravel something and you're like, I missed some opportunities here. And it was really funny with this particular friend. I was always, there's part of me that was always wishing that they would open up to me more. And here I am. And because what we want to judge or wish for in another person is a lot of times what we're not doing. And so,
Mhm.
and maybe on some level I was. And so, and that's why I laughed. I was like, I could stand on stage and talk about this, because I know it's found peace at some level. And here's now it's time to really get down to the simple stuff, because the simple stuff is what leads into the big stuff.
Mhm.
And even down to that, your analogy about somebody cooking and the other person taking out the trash. How could that person cooking might not want to be cooking either,
Tell me about it.
and then they may say something like, but that's an opportunity for them to say, hey, I don't really like to do this all the time. Now the reason why people hesitate is because the other person might say, well, I don't want to do it either, and I feel like that's your job to do it or whatever. And so then it just kind of lines up with that might not be the person to be cohabitating with, I guess. And so,
Wake up.
so I mean, and those are hard conversations, I mean, to have with people, because there's a lot of other things. But I love the saying that says that 90% of all disagreements happen because of a misunderstanding, and 10% are due to difference in values. And I think what you said is really powerful, is because expectations are a part of that 90%
Mhm.
of miscommunication, because we have expectations of individuals and other people. And you're exactly right. I have them. Everybody else has them. And I mean, it's funny because in the other Buddhist principles and stuff like that, they talk about being unattached. And well, I mean, unless you're living in a cave somewhere, you know, and even then, I mean, 0 point is for nirvana is a very hard thing to achieve. So
Absolutely. And it's the other piece about communication, and being able to express what you're expecting or what you're hoping for. I think the key to any kind of communication, and this is my favorite subject, is self-love and self-confidence.
mhm.
Right? If you fully understand yourself, and sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that, that you've accepted yourself, you're not just tolerating, but you're really respecting yourself, you're really embracing yourself. You've got these things, you don't want to change them, you've tried changing them, whatever, but you know yourself. And you understand how you function. Then the next step is having that confidence of saying, okay, this is how I function, and if I really want to have a good communication experience or partnership or relationship in business, I need to be vulnerable, and I need to say, this is who I am. This is how I communicate. Is that okay with you?
Mhm.
And you have to be self-confident for that, because you may get a rejection. And then you'll have to deal with a huge deal falling through the cracks because they don't appreciate the way that you want to communicate or the way that you do communicate. Um, and so I think those are really important keys. And what we see in life is that a lot of people are insecure. They're insecure in their life. They don't really know who they are. So when it comes to personal relationship, they put on this big show of, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do that. I love football, even though you hate it, whatever it might be. And in business, the same thing. And at work, you get a new job and it's a competitive environment. So you're not going to say that you don't know how to use Word, because it is important that you use it. And instead of then creating that team atmosphere where
Yeah.
everybody helps each other, I think in one of my books, I talked about that, how we need to really build the team again, and how to create that trusting environment where we collaborate and not compete all the time.
Yeah, that is a very troublesome thing. And one of the things I will tell you is that you can tell people, those of you out there, managers, talk to your people and ask them how they want to be coached.
Yeah.
How they want to receive feedback. I tend to be the type of person that I want direct feedback. I don't want people to beat on the bush. I don't want people to soften it, just let it all out, because then I can, at least I know where I stand. And so, and there's one of the, but not everybody likes that. And then the same thing goes in relationships. Talk to your partners, your friends and stuff, and people you care about, and say and tell them how you like to be communicated with.
Mhm.
My best friend and I, one of them is, of course, how we deliver it emotionally, but then there's other, he loves to be texted, and I absolutely hate texting. Dr. Forrest and I were just talking about that a few minutes ago.
Right.
With her, I have to text her because she lives on the other side of the pond, but it's like, but it's one of those things where um, we have to really talk to each other and that feeling. So, but I think you're definitely right in that um, not only do it, you have to ask people, and then you have to expect that
Right.
or be okay with whatever response they have, because that's a starting point
Yeah.
of how we talk. My friend and I were chatting on Friday, and things that we were chatting about when we've not liked what each other have done, and he was like, I've never really had a lot of problems with you because I can tell you, and
Mhm.
then you'll think about it, because I know nothing in you was coming from a place of being mean or nasty. It was just your very silly self, jumping in. So it was a great conversation about opening up, and I think being vulnerable and opening up is empowering. It's
Yes.
and I honestly wish more spiritual teachers would get out there and talk about their pain,
Yes.
because it makes them real. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be that stoic speaker that's up there and like talking about all the stuff I'm regurgitating what's in books. I want to talk about the fact that I've had my feelings hurt, and I still get my feelings hurt, and I have to, but I look at it as a blessing, because that's a way for me to look at
Right.
it.
And to grow, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. It's I think if people in the public light continue to pretend that everything is good, and there are like two ways in which they do that. They either you think they were born and they knew everything, they had no hardships whatsoever, or there are also a lot of speakers who or public people who first start out with their sad story. So everybody now has got a sad story, and then they tell you how they overcame it because they want to sell you something, right?
Mhm.
So that's not real communication. What is real communication is sitting down and thinking about, oh yeah, I remember this, based on a natural conversation. Or
Mhm.
if you're on stage, hopefully you've talked to the people in the audience before. That's
Mhm.
communication and bringing that in. And I'm going to tie it back to your example about managers, because we need to understand the people around us and we need to respect them. So when I speak from the stage, for example, okay, I always make sure that I refer to some of the people who I met earlier. Now, some of them don't want that. So I have to ask for permission. And the same goes for managers. You said, how do you want feedback? Well, how do you want appreciation? How
Mhm.
does somebody in your team want to be recognized? Do they want to get a big certificate at the holiday party? Or would they prefer a gift card to a cafe or to a toy store that they can use for their kids? We got
Yeah.
to understand the people, you know? And I think we've lost some of that because everything is so big and everybody is so worried about being vulnerable, while, as you just mentioned, as I told a client of mine, I said, you know what? Asking for help is a strength, because that means you're confident to handle whatever comes at you and you're willing to learn. It's
Yeah.
actually a strength to be vulnerable because you can handle it. But there's this mixed up idea in society that if you ask for help, you're weak.
No, not at all. And I don't know where that came from. Well, I think I know, obviously you're at work, it's competitive.
Yeah.
Even back in the 50s, it was you go to church, you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, because who drives the bigger car, and who's wearing, we did it on purpose because there's a part of us that feels inadequate inside of
Hmm.
ourselves, and we don't feel valued or loved or whatever emotions going on in us where we feel like we're not enough.
Right.
We started not saying things, we've all been guilty of it. It's one of those things where
Yeah.
we've said, you know, and especially in corporate America where it can be so cutthroat and so That's why I'm really digging my new place, because it doesn't have that, and the
Mhm.
one I was at before that, it's like, you make a decision as a manager and everybody would go against that. And I'm like, it's what you get to the point as an adult where you're like, I'm not here to babysit children or babysit adults.
Right.
If I
Yeah.
wanted that, I'd go have my own kids. And so, you know, and they'll probably be more mature than some of the people I've worked with. So,
Yes.
but it's one of those things where, and it's funny, I don't know if you ever work with somebody or work with people, you didn't really care for them at the work job, and then but you like them as a person.
Mhm.
And then outside of the work, I can totally hang out with them, but I could never work with them again.
Yeah.
I'm like, so,
Well,
um,
absolutely, because everybody's so different, right?
yeah,
I mean, there are people I love to death, but the idea of working with them, or living with them is like, it's not happening. It's just like, no. But that's because we know each other and we respect each other enough not to mix that up, right?
yeah. I've told people that, I don't want to live with you as a roommate or anything like that, because I want to actually be your friend later on.
Yeah.
And so, and
Yeah,
I
but
think
that's honesty,
that's honesty, and that's communicating.
Yes.
And so those are the things that people, because those people wouldn't say that sometimes. Well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. So, but the truth is and I've made this mistake, moving and being roommates. We were just talking about this because at a point in time, I couldn't afford to live without a roommate.
Mhm.
And so then years later, when I could afford to live without a roommate, I was still getting them and putting myself in situations and strains on my friendship, because I happen to be that one person who just does whatever I want, and I'm always just in my own little world. And so, that's frustrating to people.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I think in order to be true to yourself, we always say in this community, be true to yourself,
Mhm.
but also be true to other people. And emotional intelligence, it says, social awareness. It talks about that.
Yes.
And be true to the people that you care about, or even if you don't know them, it's
Right.
like they're just another human being. We want to treat them with kindness as well.
And I think in that, it's important to um, see where another person is coming from, because very often we're so in our own world that we forget that the other person may have had his or her different experiences as well,
Yeah.
and that there are cultural differences. I mean, I always bring up that example of little trigger words. You may say something to me that you mean as a compliment, and I'm going to go ballistic on you. You have no idea why. So I need to tell you that the word pretty is really offensive to me, right? If you call me pretty, I'm like up in arms. My adrenaline is like up here because of my past experiences, right? That
Yeah.
you look pretty in that dress. And I'm like, oh no, I know it's a trigger word, so I know how to handle it now, right?
Right.
But it's still, I need to tell the other person, instead of jumping down their throat, I need to say, thank you for that compliment. I just don't like that word. And then they can begin to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Versus us just butting heads right there. And there are differences in cultures. One word means this in one culture and means something completely different in another culture. So we need to be aware of who we're talking to and their individual experiences. I think we need to go back more to that. And that's the learning process. That's a self-awareness of, I haven't lived everywhere. I haven't been everywhere. So you tell me what it means to you before I tell you, this is my opinion, this is my experience. I'm going to listen to you first, and then we can figure out where this meets up.
Somewhere along the line, I thought we were getting better with that kind of stuff in our culture, in our world. Somewhere along the lines, it's not. I mean, I remember like 10 years ago, it was very much a thing that was very much a thing to talk about. It's okay to understand other cultures and, understand where they're coming from. But now, 10 years later, there's very much well, they're just, there's all this talk about, well, they shouldn't be doing that or that. And I'm like, you don't even know, just within the United States alone. I mean, there's multiple cultures. I mean,
Right.
if you were to go from Manhattan to Florida, I mean, things are vastly different. And I mean, and some people, I've heard people say that, you know, somebody recently just said that New Yorkers are rude. And I'm like, that's not really true. I mean, like, get in a New York City cab and you'll see somebody cussing a lot, or an Uber driver. Well, pretty much everywhere I walk in Manhattan, people are nice. They're like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh, and they're in their own little world. I'm like, yeah, because their entire culture is move fast, move fast, move fast. And down in Florida, it's not like that. You know, we're very much, you know, we'll get there when we get there. You know, we're, you know, Southern time, kind of stuff. And that's okay. But people get offended, you know, by the urgency of New Yorkers.
Mhm.
And it's, and that's, you know, just a part of the call. Imagine going to New Delhi where it's like 3 times the
Yeah.
size of New York.
That's fun.
So,
Yeah. But that's also part of the attitude that we bring with us to an issue, right? We've been taught the stereotype, New Yorkers are rude. Like, you know, when I grew up, everybody in Hamburg, or most people, were wearing black. And so we were always called the arrogant people. People from Hamburg are arrogant. Okay. All right. If that's your attitude with which you come to Hamburg, guess what? You're bringing that energy with you. So who do you think you're going to meet? If you think everybody in New York is rude, then your whole energy and attitude is going to say, people are going to be rude at me. I know they're going to be. Yeah, well, then your facial expression and your energy is saying rude. And guess what you're going to see? I mean, you're sowing the seeds, right?
Yeah. Why not go in with
Florida?
Why not go in with an open mind?
Yes.
You know, and so, you know, it's one of those things where, and because then you'll get triggered by everything. The restaurants will be rude and stuff like that. And and it's interesting. I was talking with, making a new friend here in my building. He owns a coffee. He owns the coffee shop here in the building. Really nice man. He come with this brilliant idea that I think you and Mo would love, where he's created a community center within the coffee shop. So I can pay $10, $20, or $30, and then I get he's created offices in the coffee shop, so I can go and have community where I can take my clients.
Very cool. Yes.
So it's a really cool concept, really nice guy. But he was a New York City cop. And he retired as a New York City cop. And one of the things we were talking about is and by the way, I'm bringing this subject up, but it's not up for an argument because I'm talking about police officers. We're just talking about one of the things that
no.
We're talking about communication. So those that are watching, that I'm not here to debate about that. I mean, what we were chatting about is communication, and about how when people saw his uniform, automatically, even if he was going to help them, really seriously wanted to help them, there would automatically be this click in them to go. And he said it's because of things that have happened. And that's why I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but we don't have to check it. We all know there's a lot of emotions around it. And what he was saying is that, because I was talking about what if we did some of these things to help people. And he said, it wouldn't work, Jared, at least not right now, until we change that trigger of automatically see that uniform and be nervous or afraid because of that, of people's past experiences. We're not going to be able to change it. Now, what we have, the police officers have to start doing is they have to start repeatedly giving good experiences to try to change perception, whether it's right or wrong. And he goes, it's not about, and so that's communication, you know, really having empathy. He is what we've lost is empathy. And so we don't try to look into individual situations and love each other. And you know, some people will say I'm very simple thinking when I say that, but I really think that simplicity is what it is. And then you know, keep it simple, stupid, you know, kiss. And so
no, it is, because what I have found is that there's a lot of meta communication going on. And I'll be frank, it drives me insane. You know, how can you talk for 2 hours about a word that you used, but you didn't mean to use that word, you really meant something else instead of what I think you meant to say? It's like, hold on a second. Now I'm wasting 2 hours of my time to talk about the word that you used. And it's like, oh my God, can we just like say we misunderstood and move on? Right. But it's like, people love to talk about that part of aspect as well, where they're just like, yeah, but I didn't mean to. And that's because they're so insecure. You know, they're so insecure that they just want to be right. And I think that's where you're saying, the empathy is missing. So with the empathy missing, we're all so competitive so that we want to be right. So I used the right word. You just misunderstood. And this is why I said it. And they give you all the reasons. And you're just sitting there going, really, I got something better to do for 2 hours and talk about what you thought I said and what you heard me say. And it's like, oh my God,
And that's exactly where because I've had, I talk just like this all the time. So even when I start to get annoyed, I generally, my voice doesn't change. And so I had somebody thinking I was yelling at them. And it's because the things that I was saying was very truthful from my heart, but it was hitting them and hitting that trigger.
Right.
And so it really just came down to, they weren't going to hear anything else other than I was yelling at them and annihilating them and all that other kind of stuff. And there's a point also, my point here is that we just have to walk away, and we've communicated, we've spoke our truth, we've done it with compassion, we've done it with empathy, and then the other person's not seeing where you're coming from. And sometimes you have to be like, I love you, but I'm going to love you from over there. So.
Well, yeah. And some people have then an issue if you're saying from love, because where this is going to go, right? And then I often say, listen, I'm just going to walk away for a moment so that neither one of us gets like overly aggravated, and we can really talk about this later.
Yeah.
But some people also don't like that. So it is the world we're in. We need to renegotiate how we communicate and how much we're confident that I'm saying it with love, and therefore I know I'm sending love. However you're receiving it, even though some people will say you're a mirror of me, but however you're receiving it really means that you've got issues, and maybe I'm not the right person to help you with your issues right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's okay too, because if we're thinking we're cells in this great body of the universe, the cells move, and so it might even be a compliment to say, hey, maybe it's time for us to move on. And if it's meant for us to come back for whatever reason, then we will. And so we're trying to hold on to that little cell, trying to go somewhere else or evolve into something else, or they're trying to do that. And don't hold each other back. I think it's sometimes it's a compliment to be able to move on and grow. And also, by the way, for people that, Dr. Forrest, I don't think we've chatted probably really in probably a good couple months, because I've been moving and you had a lot going on. And with that being said, that's not a bad thing, because then you get things to catch up with, and have a great conversation and that kind of stuff. So for those of you that are out there, just to kind of wrap up the show today, is that I think being authentic and having empathy and respect for not only yourself but others is really going to change the dynamics of how you communicate with each other.
And doing that really doing that from a place of self-love and love. I love myself enough to be honest to you. I love you enough to see that this conversation needs to go this way or it can't happen. It's a benefit to everybody involved.
Absolutely. Dr. Forrest, anything new coming up for you that you'd like to chat about? Anything?
Well, there's a lot of new stuff. I have a lot of new training coming up. I have a new book coming out, and some more events coming out. So just stay tuned for all of that, because I don't want to go into detail about all of that. That is not my way to communicate in a show that you're giving me the limelight.
Well, I will say this, that Dr. Forrest and I are looking at a couple of amazing events. We will, when we get more details, we're looking at having an event in Spain and also a retreat there, and also looking at a potential one doing something in Egypt, because I've always wanted to do Nile River cruise, and I think that would be a lot of fun. But and then seeing that kind of stuff, so at a retreat there as well. So stay tuned for more information on that. And you were just a part of an amazing event, this Psychology of Winning, And that happened on the Los Angeles Tribune a couple weeks ago. And I believe it'll be on their Roku TV, our
Yes.
network soon. So if you want to go back and watch it, definitely go back and watch it. There's some incredible people on there. Dr. Joe Vitale, Dr. Forrest, Mo Rock, then Goldie was on there. And
Yeah. And let me just jump in here, because one thing that you can see at that event is a lot of real communication, because we had a lot of the legends on and they were having real conversations with one another.
nice.
Dr. Joe Vitale talking to Dennis Waitley, Bob Proctor talking with Dennis Waitley about, John Assaraf. They were really, or Brian Tracy, they were talking with one another, and they were like remembering things and actually on the air making plans. No, we're not going to wait anymore. I'm going to call you tomorrow. It was like really those types of conversations that were real, and they were restructuring some of the things that they were doing. So therefore, I think it was a very, very different kind of event.
And that's what's kind of cool when it comes to communication, everybody, is collaboration. So these legends probably knew each other from other things they've done, and here they're on another event together, probably it's been a while. And then they were like, and it brought something out. And it's not even about legends. I mean, look at some of the things that the collaboration between Dr. Forrest and I and the Los Angeles Tribune happened as a result of me knowing my friend, our friend, Jason Danilak. And that happened as a result of him being on my cruise and him and I becoming friends. And I said, there's just amazing events that, you've got when communication happens. It's because you put yourself out there. And if you put yourself out there and with good integrity and respect to others, whatever it is you want, as eventually it can't help from happening. It's going to happen. It's just that it's the matter of timing and where you're at. So, others amazing people. I wanted to just point out. I'm going to be having Joe McClellan coming on very soon, and then Joseph Selby was supposed to be coming on a couple of weeks ago, but he was a bad car accident, and we are postponing him for January. But he will be coming on talking about the physics of God. So lots of cool stuff coming up, and looking forward to that. And hopefully, maybe I'll be broadcasting from Maui at the end of the year, because there's my friend Jonathan Hammond and Paul Selig live out there. So maybe I'll interview them actually in Hawaii, not on Zoom. So that's pretty much it. Everybody, much love, and thank you, Dr. Forrest, for coming on, and thank you everybody for being here and watching the Storytelling Alchemist show. Oh, I forgot to say, check out Roku TV, and this episode will be there probably the next couple of days. So, good thing I'm not on ABC or CBS, because I'd be in trouble for,
Exactly.
content. So anyways, much love, everybody.